This is the KUSI News at 6.
Our local newspaper, UT San Diego, is up for sale again. This would be the third time the paper has changed hands in 3 years.
Local philanthropist Malin Burnham wants to buy the Union Tribune and operate it as a nonprofit, but any deal would have to be approved by the IRS. We get more on this story from KUSI Steve Bosch. Steve?
Alan, Sandra, since the 1960s, the IRS has been skeptical of newspapers operating as nonprofits. In fact, only one newspaper in the country has gone from being private to nonprofit. And that is one of Malin Burnham's biggest hurdles.
A little over $600,000.
To better understand this hurdle, we visited with Joel Weissler, a nonprofit tax attorney and accountant in Mission Valley. If he were counseling Burnham on getting approval from the IRS, this would be his advice.
It can be owned by the charity, but it has to be as a taxable entity. It can be an advancement of their charitable purpose. But he's going to end up with a model very similar to what they have at the Tampa Times.
The Tampa Bay Times is the only for-profit newspaper in the country owned by a nonprofit.
A charity has to be substantially operated for a charitable purpose. And that's a tough thing with a newspaper. Now, there's an argument that newspapers should be allowed to be charities because they're endangered.
Most newspapers these days are struggling to one degree or another, and Burnham has suggested he may not keep it as a daily newspaper.
The news is important, and presenting the news, but we should be moving into the internet for it and presenting it that way.
Similar to the Voice of San Diego, the first online, non-profit news organization that does investigative pieces of interest to the community. It relies on donations. Burnham would have ads and subscriptions.
But that's competing with other for-profit enterprises, and the IRS won't allow that as within the charity itself. It's going to have to be a business owned by a charity, not a charity itself.
If most of the money goes to charitable purposes, as Burnham has pledged, that is acceptable to the IRS. If that line is crossed, you're not a charity anymore. Nonprofits cannot endorse candidates, but they can endorse what candidates stand for, if it fits their charitable purpose.
You're doing a report card on them. You're not really endorsing, you're saying who's got the highest score.
And the other hurdle for Burnham is the bottom line.
The biggest challenge for a nonprofit that will give them additional scrutiny is what happens if the paper isn't making money. Charities are checked as to their activities, and if their activities no longer comply with providing for the public benefit, they can be disqualified.
Now, Weissler rates Burnham's chances of getting the UT, assuming he gets the investors and the price is right, at 50-50.
Steve, has Malin made an official offer to Doug Manchester yet?
No, he has not. He's had a couple of discussions with him. This is really in the infancy. The one thing that he has to do first before he does anything is get approval from the IRS. Then he can enter into some kind of negotiations, and that's going to take 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
So this could be a drawn-out process.
Oh, yeah, it will be. Yeah.
All right. Steve, thank you.
We'll be watching.
Yeah. Well, speaking of San